right, hello cyclocross fans, and welcome back. This week on Behind the Barriers TV, a little different edition of Crosstalk. We have a very special guest with us, all the way from across the pond. I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself, because that name is, it's definitely not an American name.
No. Renaat Schotte, you say in Dutch. The English speakers pronounce it differently, of course. But I guess a lot of you know me because of the getting up early on Sundays and Saturdays to watch the cross racing from Europe.
Absolutely. Close your eyes and you'll definitely recognize the voice. So.
De topveldrit van Essen krijgt u met commentaar van tweevoudig winnaar Paul Herreigers en Michel Wuits, die vertelt over het wel en wee van de 46 deelnemers.
A lot of different topics I want to talk about, but first just a bit about yourself. How did you ultimately find your way into cyclocross? And over in Europe, it's such a huge sport. It's, you know, fans here now sort of have an understanding of how big it is over there, but to be a commentator or to be a reporter at the highest level, you must have had a long road to get there.
I started with local TV back in '93, and then I moved up to national pay TV. At the time, national, it was a sports channel I created in '95. I worked there for 3 years, and during those 3 years I got the opportunity to specialize actually into cycling. I was editor and presenter of a magazine of 30 minutes, and it was aired every week, and I made like 80 shows there. Then eventually the rights shifted from station to station, so I ended up without a job kind of, and I went to National Public TV. They acquired all the big rights from all the racing, and then it all built up, and I became a commentator and the guy on motorbike during the Flanders Classics and stuff like that. So it's all about cycling.
And so, yeah, you said, you know, earlier in your career that you said you did boxing and you did all these different sports. Did you just end up in cycling more because that's where the way work went, or was cycling always sort of your biggest passion?
Cycling, as a Belgian, you probably understand that cycling is a really big thing in our country. And my dad, he used to do finish photo at Flanders races, and he always took me as a little kid. So he kind of created that special place for cycling into my heart. But I was a nutcase when it comes to sports. I was interested in every possible sport, and my whole youth was dedicated to sports. And in the end, I wanted to write for a newspaper. Sadly enough, that didn't work out, but I got into TV. I started with local TV and then worked my way gradually up, and the sports passion became ultimately my profession, which is a very privileged position to be in.
When we talk to the athletes that come over from Europe to here, we talk about the differences as it relates to the racing itself. From your perspective, watching the races, seeing the structure around it, the organization, everything, what are your impressions when you come over here and you watch a cross race in the US?
A cross race is more hip in the States. It's more trendy, that's the word I was looking for. Whereas in Europe it comes from an ancient tradition. I know here it's relatively new, but it seems it incorporates more of like trendy factors that we don't have in Europe. And I think the Europeans can learn from that aspect, from the American way of racing. They put it on like a big show, more of a show, and all the things around it. Whereas in Belgium, it's just, yeah, it's traditional racing, and a lot of things around it are quite conservative, and I like the American way of approaching things there, particularly.
Can you point to something specific maybe that like a race like Vegas or something does that maybe you would never see in Europe?
Just the fake Elvis is already a big asset to Cross Vegas. And I saw the audience watching the guy impersonating Elvis. So just things like that, little things, small things, they can make a lot of difference. What the US, of course, doesn't have is the whole professional structure with different races being organized by one bureau like we do in Europe. And it's all about money, I guess. And strangely enough, there's more money in European racing than there is in US racing, though potential in the US is way bigger, of course.
Yeah, when we talk to Sven Ness or some of these riders that are very, they embrace the idea of the globalization of cyclocross, but we always hear that you know, there's a certain population back in Belgium or back in Europe that really don't care to see it grow, or don't want to see it grow at all. They're just happy with the way things are. From your perspective in the media or in sort of the promotion of the sport, where do you stand on that? Obviously, Belgium has a real stranglehold on the sport, and that's of huge value to you guys, but would it be more valuable if it were a global sport more so?
For me personally, I think if cyclocross would be more global, it would be an amazing sport, because now a lot of audiences are unserved worldwide. They don't know cyclocross. So if they knew and understand what the cyclocross stands for, then I think this sport has a great future, because it is backed in a 1 hour action. It's got everything. It's got everything what you can dream of from a TV perspective. So the audiences are unserved in the States because there's not a lot of cyclocross racing on TV. I don't understand that, because I see other sports and I know then they get shown, and I don't understand why they get shown, and they don't show a spectacular sport like cyclocross when there's a huge following and an underground movement that's getting above the ground and getting really trendy and selling some idea about healthy lifestyle and everything with sports included. Yeah.
It maybe help explain to the U.S. audience just what cycling and what cyclocross is like in Belgium. I think a lot of people, again, they focus on the differences in the courses or the different speeds of the racers, but outside of that, the production around it, the billboards, just the recognition, the fame, it's a much different atmosphere. Yeah,
that's true. And in Belgium, of course, when you can speak about big bucks, it is big money in Belgium involved, and the bureaus, they have a lot of power and they make the races. But we shouldn't forget, 20 years ago there was nothing in Belgium. We had like 3 or 4 races covered only. We had Worlds, we had Nationals, we had a couple of super prestige races, and that was about it. And then at the end of the 90s there was this sudden interest from for starters, Public TV, the station I work for, VRT, later became Sports, a brand. They were interested in showing the races, and that actually created the whole cyclocross buzz in Belgium more than it was before. Because if you see the ratings in Belgium, they grew gradually over the years with more TV coverage. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you show more races on TV, it'll become more popular, even in a country with a tradition like Belgium. So I believe in the States there's a huge potential. If one TV station picks it up, this might be a sport that goes sky high and captures the imagination and the passion of a lot of sports enthusiasts.
How are the U.S. riders received when they race over in Europe? What's it like to commentate them when they come over?
Yeah, they're very relaxed, and I like the way they approach the races, but what the US needs is a world champion. It's as simple as that. If you have one world champion, then things might change, then the media interest might sparkle, and then you might get that phase of growing up, and then the sports might be seen as a sport where you can make your living more than decent and explore the depths of anything possible in the magnificent thing that cyclocross, after all, for me personally, and a lot of Belgians is. It's also a social thing in Belgium. Sunday afternoon, you get together with the family, you watch it on TV. Then there's grandma baking cake, and then there's grandpa drinking a coffee. The kids are watching it. Everybody is watching it, and it's easy to view, to watch. A lot of sports are difficult to understand, to explain to broader audiences, but cyclocross has it all. It's easier than a road race. You have the action packed in 1 hour, and it's just spectacular. A lot of action is happening. So I don't get it. It's food and drinking at the same time. It's commercial TV, and it's shown on public TV most of the time. So it's very kind of confusing, the situation in Belgium. And cyclocross is most of all commercial product with all the branding and the boarding, and there's a lot of advertising, but it's shown on public TV. Public TV in Belgium doesn't show ads.
One of the bigger issues here in the US in cyclocross racing is women's equality. It's been a big issue over the last few years, and getting equal prize money, which is now pretty standard here in the US and just across the board. Over in Europe, it's been slower to come to fruition like it has here. What's the attitude like over there in the media side of things, covering the sport of women's racing? Is there a push to see it elevated to a more equal level?
Well, things are moving. We are showing from time to time a Women's World Cup live, even. And then in our neighbors, Holland, they show a lot of the racing of Marianne Vos, and women's racing is really regarded as equal to men's racing in Holland. I wouldn't say in Belgium, sadly enough, but it's growing, and you can feel that there's a sense of, okay, this is not right. Men are equal to women, equal payday. It's got to happen in sports as well, yeah.
So what's keeping it from being the case?
I think tradition and conservatism.
So over the last decade or so, covering cyclocross pretty intensely, you've seen arguably the greatest riders of all time just over the last few generations. Is there a particular rider that you've enjoyed commentating on more than others?
They're all good guys, but of course...
somebody who's more exciting, who brings the best out of you in what you do?
Well, I guess I can really enjoy stuff like Sven Nys doing maneuvers nobody else would do. I recall a race he didn't win, Zolder, 2002. There was this section in the woods, and you had like 2 single tracks, and at a certain point he chooses another track, and then he makes like a maneuver, and there's a tree in the middle, and everybody thought it was impossible to overtake there, and he does it. That's typical Sven Nys, to do stuff like that. Eventually he lost that race, but just to see action like that's something. If you see that as a commentator, you go bananas. It's it's also, you don't have to force yourself to go nuts over it. It's just suspense and action and drama all in one phase, and that's the beauty about cyclocross, because you really have sometimes actions that can change your race totally, and you don't believe they're happening, and then you see it happen, and it happens. And Sven Nys is a rider that can capture the magic of doing stuff that other riders can't. Yeah.
How about over the last several years, as the American riders have started to come over more, is there a particular U.S. rider that has impressed you, or that you enjoy commentating on?
I like most of them. I mean, for starters, they're in their approach, they're different than the European guys. You got I call him the elder guy, Johnson. Maybe he won't like to hear that. But then you've got the flamboyant Jeremy Powers, and then there's the straightforward Ryan Trebon. I like the different characters and the way they approach European races, and I hope one day one of those US guys will just go straight down to the world's rainbow jersey, and that would be great for both of the continents and for the sports as well. And to say a favorite, no, I can't say I have a favorite. It's just the way Anglo-Saxon riders in general approach races is different from what the Belgian and Euro guys are doing, and I like that because it seems more relaxing. Maybe it isn't, but it seems more relaxing, and it's a thing where European guys can learn from, because sometimes the Europeans look more stressed than the US guys. Maybe they're not. Maybe it's just the same. Maybe it's just the outlook from the outside. But that is fascinating to see how Americans in the whole stress of a race seem more relaxed.
I'm sure you've watched some U.S. racing. As a commentator, how do you describe the differences maybe between the commentating style? I mean, we as Americans, we listen, we don't understand what's being said, but we definitely pick up on things. How do you think that's different than how we call races in the U.S.?
The funny thing about the U.S. races, of course, is there's no broadcasting system. So when I see sometimes I try to stay awake and see some feeds coming from a US race, some webcast, and then I want to see it. And at that moment I feel privileged, because then I know I'm probably one of the few Belgians so crazy to watch a feed from the States with a US race with a non-broadcast facilities, but I still enjoy the race. And then what strikes me each time, that is the enthusiasm of the commentators. I mean, they try to sell it more than we do. I think we are more drier. Maybe you don't think about it like that, but it seems like, oh, let's go, and it's happening all the time. So maybe it's exaggerated, but I'm copying it in a way. Maybe not in the cyclocross races, but on the road, in the road racing, I try to create that same sense of enthusiasm to cover a race, because I think it adds to the emotion for the viewer at home in his seat to see a race, especially a road race. It can be boring a long time. So you have to work with certain levels of enthusiasm and get them at the right time. And I think Americans, they're specialists, extreme specialists in doing that, giving the right emotion at the good moment in a race, in a sporting event. And that's something, yeah, I think every European commentator can learn from.
In all the races that you've called, is there one that was the most fun, that was the most passionate, that you look back on and say, wow, that was just such a pleasure to be on the microphone?
I have special memories. I have to stay with the race of your country. The Worlds in Louisville were, for me, were unbelievable. Also with the whole story around it of having the Worlds move to one day and because flooding. Of the flooding, it all added up and it created an adrenaline rush like never seen before. And I was tired and I was still a bit, I don't know if I was jet lagged, but I was still. It was such a huge day, and then to cover 4 Worlds on one day, I think we will never redo that again. Yeah. So that alone, that made it special, and then to have a Belgian winner in the US, that also made it very special. And there's so many races, and Worlds are more special, and also what was interesting in Louisville, I could move around more than in Europe, because at Worlds in Europe, there's 30,000, 40,000 people, and then I can't move around. I'm stuck in the pit. So it made me more participating in the race than in a Euro race, a Euro World. So, viva Louisville!
Speaking to the differences of the commentary style in the U.S. to Europe, in the U.S., very enthusiastic commentators. They all sort of have their catchphrase. There's Dave Toll. Last lap, 1 to go, 1 to go, 1 to go, 1 to go, 1 to go. There's all these different phrases. Is there particular favorites of yours that, again, when we're listening in Flemish and having no idea what you're saying, is there something we should listen for? And what does it mean?
I don't know if I have stop laps, actually. I do know I have them in road race coverage, because I'm the guy doing the Tour of Italy in Belgium, so I use a lot of Italian, and I know a lot of people find that funny to hear the Italian, and then it's Giro, and then I always shout, or a lot of the time I'm shouting every stage, ultimo chilometro. Now I make it sound like English, but I mean the last final K. So in cyclocross, I really don't know. I think.
Are there some phrases that you use, like ways to describe movements or actions in the race? Like dancing on the pedals. Is there anything like that?
Ja, dansen op de trappers, op de pedalen, of course. Of course I'll use that, but I just don't know what words I keep reusing. When I'm doing a cyclocross, I'm the guy in the field standing in between the public or in the pit. Yeah. Then I'll in the beginning of the race, I will always go to the first corner, because the first corner, or the place where they go into the field, and then I will try to bazooka them. Bazooka, it's not an English word, but I will try to name all of them, because I know the guy in the booth, my colleague, he's not able just to call 1 to 10, but I'm just at the fence, and that's what I'm going to try to do, give positions. Then he can build on that information. So the first time I will just go Nijs, Wellens, Van der Haar, and so further on, and until 10. A lot of names, but it'll probably be the right order. And then afterwards, I will go. I will give shorties like lekker band, flat tiring, stuff like that. I mean that returns a lot, of course. Broken gear, versnellingsapparaat kapot, stuff like that. And it must sound exotic, but to me it's just like technical information. Versnelling, that means attack, stuff like that. It's I just don't know what I'm saying. Yeah. Kind of. I try to live the race from the outside, but getting into the rhythm of the race, and then I move from point A to B. I know the circuits, and each race I go to the circuit and look if there are any changes, and then I go from point A to B, and I try to rehearse it during, for instance, the youth races, and by the time we go on air, I know exactly from that what I have to do. At the start, I'll be at that point, then I go to point B, C, D, E, F, and so further on, and at a certain point, okay, I've done enough about position thing. The race is getting into a certain kind of situation. Now it's time for the pit zone. Let's get some director sportif on the microphone and hear what they say about the race, and then follow what's going on and stuff like that. That's like routine.
As you look at the rest of your career in cycling or in cyclocross, where do you hope to see this sport in 10 years?
I hope it's televised in the States with like any major race being shown on US TV.
Does it have to be TV, or could it be more online? It seems like a lot of people in the US, and we all watch the races online.
I know, but it doesn't matter somehow if it's what is online. What will TV be in 10 years? That's a difficult question, because I don't watch, to be honest, a lot of TV anymore. Yeah. I'd rather make it. I'd prefer to make it. So as long as it's on a screen. But I just hope cyclocross gets the big audiences, or the bigger audiences. Of course, an audience like you have at Super Bowl and NFL and all the other American sports you won't have. But I just hope that the US cyclocross has a bigger audience, and that it gets the audience it deserves, because it's a beautiful sport. Yeah. We all agree.
Yeah, and vice versa. I hope that same for me. I hope in 10 years we have more access to the racing, not only in Belgium but around the world. But you know, thinking about last night and the coverage we just did in Vegas, you know, we have so many viewers from the US, but it'll be great to have more of the Belgians start to take notice, and more of the fans from Europe to take notice of cyclocross here.
There is interest, no doubt about that, and I think globalization has to go on. Especially the World Cup has to be more international, and we need that American World Cup. And I just hope that there are enough sponsors and people interested in creating the budget to have an American World Cup here. That would be awesome, and would be great to cover the whole story and the sports, because World Cup is what creates the extra on a race. I know World Cup isn't about democracy and everybody participating like you have now in the US races, but maybe you can combine it. Maybe you can still have the other races when there's a World Cup going on. Yeah. I think that should be possible.
Yeah, no, it makes a great story.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
With pleasure.
We'll keep listening to you. We won't know what you're saying all the time, but we'll keep listening.
Well, maybe I have to slide in a couple of English words then.
Do it. Thank you.
Okay.